My name is Matthew Bogart,
I'm Jesse Holden.
and we're the creators of a graphic novel series called Incredible Doom. It's a story about a group of teenagers in the early 90s that get their lives just turned upside down by the arrival of the early internet. Cory Doctorow called it incredibly strong and not a little disturbing. This is a series about the stories behind that graphic novel, what it took to create it, and some of the stories that inspired it. We hope to cover everything from the mini comics that we made to the Patreon that we ran to how we collaborate with each other to how we ended up with an agent and a book deal at one of the biggest publishers. Because I always feel like the best thing to help me get inspired to get a project up off the ground is to listen to how other people did the same thing. So, where to start? The furthest back that I can trace it was September 19th of 2016. I know the date exactly because I track all the movies that I watch, and that was the date that I watched Moonrise Kingdom. What happens with so many movies that I love got to the end credits and was just filled with this urge to oh my god, I love making things, I gotta go make something. And I had just recently read some of my favorite issues of one of my all-time favorite comics, which is Stray Bullets, and I started to imagine what it might be like to try to cross these two stories, both of which deal with runaways in one way or another. And that got me really excited. With that excitement came a realization. I'd been trying to make cartooning my profession for many years at this point. And if I was going to devote myself to another multi-year long comics project like the one I was thinking about, there's one thing in particular I wanted to know at the end of it, which was whether this was going to work out as a career or whether this should just be a hobby. So knowing that, I made a list. I thought, if this might be the last big comic project that I take on, what are all the things I've ever wanted to do in comics that I've yet to do? And can I design a project that checks all of them off the list? Here are some of the things that were on that list. I wanted to make little tiny mini comics that were meticulously produced and were collected into a set. I'd seen things like Oregon History comics and these comics that I love called Monster Box from years ago, where people had made these mini comics and put them into a slipcase, and I thought they were the coolest things, and I'd always wanted to do it. I wanted to try to do an ongoing series where each issue was self-contained, but also you read all the issues together and you get a larger story that's unfolding. I wanted to do something that came out regularly, that forced me into a schedule, forcing me to get comics out of the door instead of just working forever on trying to make it perfect. And I wanted something that I could draw entirely on my iPad Pro. I wanted to be able to work from anywhere, but the iPad Pro, if I worked around its limitations, seemed like it could do it. So with all of these things in mind, I tried to design a story that would allow me to do all of this. To do that, I first started looking at my inspiration. I looked at Moonrise Kingdom and Stray Bullets and tried to figure out what was it about these that got me excited. I noticed they were both period pieces, which seemed interesting. I noticed they were both about teenage protagonists or younger. I noticed in the case of Stray Bullets that it takes place at the time in the 70s and 80s when the author was a teenager. So I started looking back into my own teenage years to figure out, well, what might have been happening in my teenage years that would be interesting to tell. And I remembered this feeling that centered around computers at the time. I remember this feeling that the kids around me who were really into computers had somehow stumbled upon this kind of amazing secret club. And knowing how important computers were going to become to everything, it was actually a really important secret. But I didn't know a lot about it. My own experiences with the internet and with computers at the time were pretty simple and not very interesting. So I started to interview some friends to see what other stories were out there. And they told me all kinds of fascinating stories that had nothing to do with my experiences. There was so much there that I hadn't been exposed to. And after doing these interviews, I was hooked. I was like, this is great. There's a million stories here. I need to get started on this. And that's when I first talked to Jesse about it.
Matt and I had worked together for some time, and I hadn't really been directly involved in any large-scale comic.
Which is worth noting, when you say that we were working together, we were not doing anything creative together. We were working retail together, essentially.
Right, that's what I mean to say. Yeah, thank you for catching that, yeah.
We were in the back room at work and not working, and you were asking me what I was doing comics-wise. And I mentioned, I was thinking of doing this comic about the early internet, and I had this story about this guy and this girl that meet on the early internet and then run away from home together. And you sort of gave me this look, like, are you conning me at the moment? And then you said, I met a girl on the early 90s internet, and I kind of ran away from home with her. And I was like, oh my God, tell me everything about it. I thought, because I'd been doing these interviews with people to try to find stories that I might be able to glean interesting tidbits from. And then you were like, I have a story that takes place in this period that involves the early internet and running away from home. And I was like, oh, perfect. So I asked Jesse, like, please, can I talk to you about this? And he agreed. And we went to a local fast food restaurant, and I grilled him about this relationship, about what the BBSs were like at the time. Like, we talked forever. When we ended that conversation, I decided I wanted to ask you if you wanted to not just be someone willing to provide stories for inspiration, but actually like help write the first issue.
Do you want to talk about why it was called Incredible Doom from the beginning?
Oh, when I was thinking about the themes that could be present in, or the areas that I could explore in the series, there was the early internet, there was the magic scene, but then the third thing was going to focus on 90s comic books. That stuff was what got me really fired up when I was this age at this time. But that's also part of the reason that the title is what it is. I started looking at 90s comic book titles, The Incredible Hulk and The Spectacular Spider-Man. I started mashing together various different words that were used in titles like that and came up with Incredible Doom. And I thought, fine, that's good enough. Let's just go with that. In recent years, there is a nice feeling that title gives to every story we tell under it. This feeling of foreboding, this feeling that things could go terribly wrong at any moment. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just how I read it.
That's what I've always appreciated about it too. And when we have an opportunity to potentially rename it, and I always come back to Incredible Doom because for the same reason that you do there, that I love the idea of someone reading it for the first time, a little bit on edge, waiting for everything to fall apart.
I think it's just as possible that they could be reading the comic and thinking, all right, so when does the incredible part start?
Right. The other thing I like about it is that the cadence is really good. It's like a ba-ba-da-ba-boo name, you know?
I was looking for a good ba-ba-da-ba-boo.
Yeah, like, so you think about different ba-ba-da-ba-boos, and then you hit Incredible Doom, and it's da-dun and da-duh.
Yeah.
You know, the stress is there. and the
Yeah.
ooh, I think it works. It's musical.
Proud to be in a long line of great babada
Yeah,
baboos.
there's just we're the current torchbearer of the Babada Baboo legacy.
My God, we should not be doing a video series. In the next episode of this series, we're going to talk about how we work together. So if you like that, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to pick up a copy of the comic Jesse's going to mention right now.
Pick up a copy of Incredible Doom Volume 1.
And you can pre-order Incredible Doom Volume 2 right now. It's going to be coming out on September 6th. And if you like the behind-the-scenes stuff, make sure to check out my Patreon, which is linked in the description.
Babada Baboo.